When I first got into Temtem, a wise tamer told me, "Give a man a TV spread and he'll be good at video games for a day. Teach a man to TV spread and he'll be good at video games for a lifetime." Since then, I've learned everything I could about TVs, what they are, how to get them, and most importantly, how to correctly apply them to my Tems to bring out their full potential. Whether you're brand new to the game or trying to climb to the top of the ladder, I'm hoping you'll be able to learn something from this guide. With that being said, there's a ton of information to cover, so let's get right into it. First of all, what are TVs? TVs, or training values, are extra points you give to your Tems to further increase their stats. Every couple of TVs added to a stat will increase it by a set amount, but you can only apply a maximum of 1000 TVs to a single Tem and only up to 500 per stat. They're mainly obtained by defeating Tems. Every Tem in the game gives a specific amount of TVs for a specific stat to any Tem that defeats it in battle. These TVs are awarded based on participation, the same way that XP is distributed, meaning your 2 Tems on the field will receive TVs, as well as any Tem with the Coward's Cloak gear or your entire team if you toggle on Coward's Blanket. All of these Tems will receive the full TV value from each defeated Tem. For example, if you defeat a Saipat, which gives 3 HP TVs, and you have Coward's Blanket toggled on, all Tems in your party will get 3 HP TVs. There are locations in the archipelago that are most efficient to grind at depending on which stat you want to increase. I'll show these locations on screen now. Be sure to check the description for more info and any new discoveries on top tier grinding locations. Grinding TVs can take a while, but there are some items that speed up the process. We already mentioned Coward's Cloak and Coward's Blanket, which lets you train multiple Tems at once. But there is also the valuable Proteins gear, which doubles the amount of TVs gained per KO. Slap it on any Tem and train them in half the time. If you're training multiple Tems at once using Coward's items, make sure they take turns holding Proteins so everyone can get their TVs in a timely manner. Also, since some Tems award TVs for multiple stats, the patch items have a niche usage in preventing the holder from getting the TVs you don't want. And finally, if you accidentally get too many TVs in a single stat, the Eraser and Eraser Plus gear work to flip the script and subtract TVs received instead. This will be important for fine-tuning your build later. But what if you need TVs but just don't have the time to slaughter hundreds of Tems? Well, luckily, there are also consumable items that instantly grant or remove TVs. These come in the forms of smoothies, fruits, and candies, which give or reduce 50, 20, or 1 TV per use respectively. They can be bought at these locations for these prices. Using consumables can save you a ton of time grinding, but they can get a bit expensive, costing about 20,000 Pansuns to fully TV train 1 Tem. Overall, if you have the extra Pansuns, use them so you can spend more time actually playing the game. But if you're strapped for cash, take the extra time to grind your TVs at the locations we covered previously. So now that we've covered the basics of TVs, let's move on to the question on every tamer's mind. How do I decide on a TV spread for my Temtem? Well, every Tem is different, so in order to answer this question, we need to ask a few more questions. First of all, what is our Tem's goal? Usually, this boils down to 3 criteria. Does our Tem want to deal damage? Does our Tem want to survive damage? And does our Tem want to go faster than other Tems? Each Tem you build, 1 or 2 of these boxes will be checked, and that will determine its role, and therefore its stat priority and its optimal TV spread. If you have a Tem that wants to deal and survive damage, we call them a bulky attacker. These Tems are built to outtrade the enemy with their raw numbers, even if they aren't as fast. If your Tem wants to deal damage and outspeed other Tems, we call them a fast attacker. These Tems are meant to go first to apply their damage, potentially securing a kill before the target has a chance to fight back. If your Tem wants to survive damage and outspeed enemy Tems to apply buffs and debuffs to allies and enemies, they are a fast support. Lots of Tems that use techniques like Sparks, Purgation, Perfect Jab, and Humiliating Slap qualify as supports, since they're just there to multiply the damage of their ally, all while using their defensive investment to stay healthy. And finally, if your Tem wants to go all in on surviving damage, we call them a wall. No speed or damage necessary themselves, these guys are all about eating damage and gaining value through other means, like true damage through poison ticks, or applying buffs to their ally or debuffs to the enemy. Because of this, you could also call them a bulky support. So with the jargon explained, what exactly does it all mean? Well, each of these boxes relate to a stat. Bulky attackers want HP and an offensive stat, and possibly a bit of defenses. Fast attackers prioritize speed over HP, supports want HP and speed, and walls want a mix of HP and defenses. That's the basic rule of thumb at least. There technically isn't anything stopping you from creating new roles, like a mixed attacker that invests in both offensive stats to use special and physical moves, or some kind of half wall who skips HP in favor of one defensive stat and spends the extra TV somewhere else, like an offensive stat or speed. But more often than not, these roles are less efficient since not all of the stats are used at any given time, resulting in wasted stats. A Tem's base stats also play a big part in what role they can play without wasting stats. For example, you can decide to play a fast physical attacking Gharunder, and it will technically be the fastest and hardest hitting Gharunder in the West. But since you aren't taking advantage of Ghaulder's massive HP pool by playing them defensively, they'll probably fall short overall compared to a naturally fast physical attacker like Hazrat. So these are the main roles in Temtem and their stat priorities, but there is one final stat that needs mentioning, and it's the most important to get right. I'm of course talking about stamina. If a Tem doesn't have enough stamina, it will need to rest or overexert at crucial moments, causing it to skip turns and damage itself. And if it has too much stamina, that's wasted TVs that could be placed elsewhere. In both scenarios, we're lowering the value of the rest of our stats because our stamina is incorrect. Because of this, I always calculate stamina first when making a spread for a new Tem. So let's cover how to do that. The goal for most Tems is to be able to attack 3 turns in a row without overexerting, although some Tems are really squishy and can only attack twice before they probably die anyway, and some Tems are really bulky and want to stick around on the field and attack for 4 or 5 turns. And all the while, some Tems rely on expensive techniques and need a stamina gear to play efficiently, and some Tems have cheap techniques and are fine with just their base stamina. Every Tem has a different stamina requirement, so I'll show a couple of examples. Let's start off with Vulffy. Vulffy has one main attacking move, Plague, which costs 31 stamina. Vulffy has other useful techniques, but they all cost less stamina than Plague, so as long as we have enough stamina to use 3 Plagues, we'll be able to attack 3 times no matter what move we press. 3 Plagues cost 93 stamina total, but it's not as simple as giving Vulffy 93 stamina. Since we regenerate a little bit of stamina at the end of each turn, putting Vulffy at 93 would be wasted TVs. Our technique rotation looks like this. We Plague and lose 31. We regen a little at the end of the turn, Plague again for minus 31, plus regen a little, and one more Plague for minus 31. The goal is for that final Plague to leave Vulffy at 0 stamina, so there's no TV waste. And to do that, we need to know how much stamina we regen in between attacks. To be precise, you regenerate 5% of your stamina stat plus 1 at the end of each turn. But that's a bit arbitrary, so to simplify it, you regenerate 4 stamina each turn if you have at least 41 stamina, and 1 more for every 20 more stamina you get. So plus 5 at 61, plus 6 at 81, plus 7 at 101, so on and so forth. Using this information, let's calculate our stamina like so. 3 Plagues will cost 93 stamina. Vulffy's base stamina is 65, so we know we will be regenerating at least 5 stamina per turn. 93 minus 5 twice comes out to 83, and since 83 is higher than 81, we're gonna need at least 81, which lets us regenerate 6 per turn instead. 93 minus 12 is 81, so Vulffy needs exactly 81 to Plague 3 turns in a row without overexerting. This comes out to be 69 stamina TVs for Vulffy, but the amount of TV investment depends on your base stamina, so every Tem will need a different value to reach their ideal stamina amount. If you have trouble following this math, the Tem.team damage calculator can make it easier. You can keep adding stamina and guess and check until you can perform next turn 3 times using the techniques of your choice without overexerting. So, calculating stamina is a little complicated, but at least Vulffy tends to spam one move. But what about Tems that use a different technique each turn? For that, let's look at Tulcan. Tulcan's main attacking move is Fiery Soul, which costs 27 stamina. However, there is a good chance you will want to throw out a Tornado on turn 2 or 3 when it's off hold. Tornado costs a whopping 36 stamina, so our technique rotation will look like this. Minus 27, plus regen, minus 36, plus regen, minus 27. This costs 90 stamina total. Since that's more than 61, we know we need at least 61 stamina, so let's just set our regen to 5 and go from there. After calculating, we need 80 stamina to do this rotation. However, if we get one more stamina point, we can set our stamina to 81 and regen 6 per turn. This is situationally worth it if we factor in the need to rest later in the game, so 81 it is. However, if we get this much stamina on Tulcan, it takes 133 stamina TVs, which is almost twice what Vulffy needed. So you have a choice to make whether or not to invest those TVs, run a stamina item, or plan for a cheaper technique rotation. For example, 71 stamina is plenty to Fiery Soul 3 times, but Tornado will overexert you if it's the third move you press. This makes you less flexible, but it does cut your TV investment almost in half. 67 stamina is the bare minimum you would need if you want to Fiery Soul, Tornado, and throw in a cheap Wind Burst. But I'd caution you against planning for such a limited rotation. It can really lower your potential if you're forcing yourself to use Wind Burst as part of your planned rotation, rather than giving yourself the option of a third Fiery Soul. So for Tulcan, I would recommend 71 or 81. But what if we ran a stamina item like I mentioned before? Well, it kinda depends which one. Sweatband restores an extra 10% of your stamina rounded up at the end of each turn. Tulcan's base stamina at level 100 is 57, which means you will regenerate an extra 6 stamina per turn, for a total of 10 without investment. We still want to be able to Fiery Soul, Tornado, Fiery Soul, which costs 90 stamina. Saving you the trouble of extra math, Tulcan would only need 66 stamina with a Sweatband, but Tulcan's stamina costs are definitely on the high side, so it may be worth running Fake Beard on them instead, which gives you Invigorated for 2 turns and halves your stamina costs. However, if you switch in, you will only get 1 turn of Invigorated, so it's not always consistent. What is consistent is you will be able to press Tornado while being Invigorated, so I would recommend calcing for Invigorated Tornado and then 2 unchanged Fiery Souls, which works out to be 62 stamina, only 28 stamina TVs. But there are tons of other breakpoints you can do with each gear. For example, 80 stamina lets you Fiery Soul and Tornado twice each if you start your turn with Fake Beard. 85 lets you do it if you have Sweatband, and has the added benefit of making Wind Burst stamina positive if you're going for the long game. There's also Bait and Matcha, which are high value on slower Tems, but not the best on Tulcan. Furthermore, if you're running Mom's Lunch or morale boosting Whip on your team, you may want to calc Tulcan's stamina to account for those extra costs. The point I'm trying to make is with proper stamina investment and gear choice, you can make some incredibly valuable plays you otherwise would have to skip a turn and sacrifice HP for. So, take the time planning your stamina and technique rotations to make sure the rest of your TVs aren't wasted by overexerting often. Okay, with stamina covered, let's move on to how to do the rest of our stats. Luckily, investing in these stats is a lot less complicated and the calculator really does most of the work for you. Remember when we mentioned roles? Well, once you get your stamina settled, you kinda just dump the rest of your TVs into your most important stats. Let's pull up our Vulffy again. We have 69 TVs in stamina, and for this build I want to play a fast, special attacking Vulffy. You have a choice of maxing speed and having lower special attack, or maxing special attack and having lower speed. For this example, I want Vulffy to hit as hard as possible, so let's max special attack and put 431 in speed. Next, you want to adjust these values. The maximum amount of TVs allowed in one stat is 500, but if you lower Vulffy's special attack investment to 499, they still have 289 special attack. They only lose an actual stat point if you go to 498. Essentially meaning 499 TVs is the same as 500, but you get 1 more TV to spend elsewhere. Same thing with speed. 430 and 431 are the same, but now we have 2 TVs to put somewhere else. Let's test if these TVs fit anywhere. 1 point in HP gives us an extra HP point. So by maximizing our efficiency elsewhere, we were able to get 1 value point of HP onto our Vulffy. This might seem unimportant, but it's absolutely free, and you'll thank yourself later when your Vulffy survives a random attack with 1 HP in the future. So what we have now is called an optimized build. It will help Vulffy fulfill the role of a fast special attacker while spending the TV points in a generally efficient way. Okay, let's put what we've learned about stamina and stat priorities, and make a bulky physical attacker build for Gharunder from start to finish. Starting with stamina, Gharunder's technique rotation is Wastewater, Wastewater, Piezoelectric Blow, which is pretty dang expensive. But for this scenario, let's run Sweatband on our Gharunder. With the extra regen, our ideal stamina is 70, or 54 stamina TVs for our full rotation. Now since we want Gharunder to do big damage, let's put the bulk of our leftover TVs into attack, 496 to max it, and whatever's left goes into defensive stats. But should we invest in HP, defense, or special defense? It's a little complicated, but 9 times out of 10, it will be more worth it to invest into HP to increase the resilience of your Tems, rather than defense or special defense. The reason being, defense and special defense provide percent damage reduction to a single type of damage, but HP provides flat damage reduction to both damage types. Also because of this, it's almost never correct to invest into defense and special defense unless the Tem's HP is already maxed out.
More on this later, but for now we have 496 attack and 447 HP, with 3 TVs in defense for a value point. Those 3 leftover TVs could fit in special defense instead, but since Gharunder already has high special defense, let's do whatever we can to amp up their physical bulk. Optimized spread for Gharunder complete. Keep in mind that since this spread was calculated for Sweatband Gharunder, you will need to redo it in the future if you want to try a different gear piece. Before we get more advanced, let's do one more optimized build, this time focusing on defensive stats and building a wall. How about Kalabyss? Starting with stamina, usually Kalabyss just presses Toxic Ink each turn, and we're really bulky so I want to be able to use it 4 times without overexerting. To Toxic Ink 4 times, we need 60 stamina. We're 1 point away from 61, so we might as well get it to increase our regen to 5 instead of 4. This also gives us the added benefit of pressing Aqua Stone on one of those turns without overexerting. However, if we get to 62, we can Humiliating Slap on one of those turns instead. The added flexibility should be nice, so 62 stamina or 109 TVs it is. Now, since our Kalabyss is going to function as a wall, let's fully invest into HP, defense, and special defense. Kalabyss maxes out at 497 HP TVs, and their special defense is way lower than their base defense, so let's just drop TV into special defense to even us out against special attackers. 393 special defense TVs leaves us with 1 leftover TV, which gives us a value point in speed. Wait, do we care about speed on Kalabyss? Well, we speed Tygario now, and we outspeed enemy Kalabysses usually. I think in this scenario the 1 speed isn't super important, but it won't hurt you either. And there you have another optimized spread. This Kalabyss should be sufficiently bulky for all your Toxic Ink and Humiliating Slapping needs. Okay, we've done 3 optimized spreads, and now we'll be moving on to the advanced section of the guide. But before we continue, I need to stress this point. If you're a new player just getting into competitive PvP, or maybe you're just trying to do dojo rematches, using optimized spreads will work perfectly fine. For the rest of the video, I'll be talking about fine-tuning your spread, which is only really effective if you have a firm grasp on the meta and what you want your Tems to counter. So until you reach that point, sticking to optimized spreads using the method I showed you will save you a lot of unnecessary work. With that being said, let's talk about specific investments, where we calculate our stats for specific situations. The most common example of this involves speed. First, let's pull up that Vulffy spread we made. We've established that Vulffy loves spamming Plague, and this technique is high priority, meaning it multiplies your speed by 1.5 whenever you use it. With 430 speed TVs, our Vulffy is currently moving at 248 speed, but its Plagues come out at a whopping 372 speed. Looking at this table, which ranks every Tem by speed, Amphitheater only reaches 347 with normal priority moves. Technically speaking, if we only consider 2 priority moves, as long as our Plague reaches 348 speed, we can reliably outspeed every 2 priority move in the game, since nothing naturally outspeeds Amphitheater. So we can safely lower Vulffy's speed TVs to 350 to reach 232 speed, so that our Plagues reach 348 speed. And nice, that frees up extra TVs to put into HP. I know that was a lot of information all at once, so let me put it in different terms. As long as our Tem has 232 speed, and it uses a high priority move, it simply cannot be outsped by a normal priority move unless the user has speed buffs. The competitive community calls this outspeeding the 2 prio metagame, and it's a very common speed breakpoint for Tems that use 3 prio moves. 221 is also quite common if your team isn't worried about Amphitheater, as 221 will let you outspeed everything else. And since these breakpoints are so common, some tamers go beyond and do something called speed creeping, and Vulffy is a great example of this as well. Nothing is stopping you from investing a couple extra TVs into your Vulffy to speed creep it up to 233. Since so many Tems stop at 232 or lower, having more speed gives you a slightly higher chance of outspeeding any 3 priority move they use. And since Vulffy's Plague applies exhaustion to any target hit, having it go first is incredibly valuable. Take Tulcan from before, for example. We spent a long time talking about its stamina options because it's a really stamina-hungry Tem. Plaguing it and applying exhaustion before it can use Fiery Soul or Tornado will absolutely destroy its momentum. But at the same time, there's nothing stopping Tulcan players from speed creeping their Tulcan up to 234. So maybe you want to take your Vulffy up to 235. Then again, what if their Tulcan is sitting at 236, 237, 238? This is why it's called speed creeping. We could just keep creeping along until we reach max speed. The more TVs we invest into speed, the higher your chances are of going first. The only caveat is you're getting less value elsewhere in your build. So what's the point I'm trying to make? Should you speed creep your Tems or not? I think an extra point of speed on certain Tems that get more value from it can't hurt you, but the whole point of getting 232 is to always outspeed 2 priority techniques. In the end, running 233 speed might come in clutch once in a while against rival 3 priority users, but it won't provide you with the extra security of knowing you will outspeed. The only way to do that is to intentionally set your speed to outspeed specific Tems. Okay. Aside from speed, the other 2 common specific investments are surviving hits from specific Tems and securing damage against specific Tems. For this example, let's go back to Kalabyss, and let's check if it can survive against a semi-common threat, Tactical Strike 2-Rock. If 2-Rock has max attack TVs, this Kalabyss spread we built from before with 0 defense TVs can survive a Feather Gatling and Turbine with 18 HP left over. However, if 2-Rock or its ally has War Drum equipped, Kalabyss will be knocked out on turn 2. Not to worry, we can shift a couple TVs from special defense over to defense until we survive with 1 HP after those 2 hits. And with a slight adjustment, bam, 50 defense TVs and we can make sure we survive against 2-Rock with War Drum. Okay, but what if in this imaginary meta, Hand Fan 2-Rock is super common? Then we need 185 defense TV. It took a big chunk out of our special defense TVs, but if we're expecting our Kalabyss to need to face off against 2-Rock often, it should be worth it. Overall, Kalabyss is a wall, so it had it pretty easy surviving against 2-Rock. But what about our Gharunder from before? Well, currently we're dying to Stoneball if the 2-Rock has War Drum, and in this scenario we really don't want to decrease our attack TVs for more HP because we just love dealing damage so much. Okay, well all we have to do is pull some points out of HP and put them into defense. Remember what I said earlier, defense will provide more damage reduction per point than HP if we're only worried about a single damage type. So after pulling points out of HP and putting them into defense, guessing and checking, 371 HP TVs and 78 defense TVs will allow us to survive that War Drum Stoneball with 1 HP left over. Great value! Luckily, Gharunder has naturally high special defense, and double checking our Vulffy build from before, Gharunder can still easily survive a Dust Vortex. Like I said earlier, it's pretty much never worth it to invest into defense and special defense unless your HP is maxed. Just invest in whatever stat you need more and have HP carry you for the other damage type. It's just more efficient. So those are 2 defensive investment examples. To show you our final specific investment example, an offensive investment, let's keep the enemy 2-Rock around and bring that Vulffy back over to our side. 2-Rock is such a common threat in this imaginary meta that our Vulffy is specially made to counter them. Assuming the 2-Rock is 500 HP TVs, our Vulffy can easily knock it out in 2 hits with Plague with a little damage left over. But since our Vulffy is only on this team to counter 2-Rocks, we can actually lower the special attack investment slightly. Bringing that 499 down to 354 gives us enough damage to 2-hit KO 2-Rock with Plague, even if that 2-Rock has a value point in special defense. And that's a ton of extra TVs left over to put into HP to help Vulffy survive against 2-Rock's partner. So those are the basics of specific investments. You have a lot of freedom to calc your Tems to function above and beyond in very specific situations. But a word of caution, although your Tems will be amazing in those specific situations, they may fall short in general. Once again, my advice is to stick to optimized spreads until you get the hang of the current meta, and then feel free to adjust your stats to give you a better chance at winning against those meta Tems. And that brings us to the end of our guide. We got pretty complex at the end there, but Temtem is a complex game. TVs are one of the most difficult things to understand, but having a firm grasp of how they work will take your Tems to the next level. And while you're still learning to make spreads, the Temtem community is always willing to lend a hand. The official Discord is full of tamers that will help with your spread if you ask politely. Tortenites-Garden.com has a collection of spreads made by high-ranked players, and you can always ask me for help in the comments of my videos, or in my community Discord server. I'll give you a hand whenever I have time, so just do your best, and I wish you the best of luck in building your teams for success. Thanks for watching! My name is Blunk, and I make Temtem content for YouTube, and I stream on Twitch. If you like this video, thanks! Stay tuned for more, and have a nice day.